Welcome to the Drunk Dietitians podcast, co-hosted by your favorite tipsy registered dietitians, yours truly, Sammy Previtt, co-owner of Dietitians of Palm Valley, and Jenna Warner, owner of Happy Strong Healthy. Us dietitian besties can't stand diet culture bullshit and love keeping it real. Our mission is for all humans to believe that they are made for so much more than chasing a smaller body. We are also here to share with you that food can be fun and pleasurable again. Although we're medical professionals, we are human too. We are not afraid to share our deepest secrets and how years of our lives were taken by diet culture. We started this podcast so no human has to feel alone in their journey towards food freedom. So grab your favorite cocktail and join us for our favorite casual happy hour and expect to laugh, cry, learn, and grow. Cheers.
Welcome back, everybody. We had the most, I feel like it was 50 minutes that went by in 5 because this conversation with Miss Maya Feller it just took so many incredible turns, and I don't even want to say too much right now because I can't wait for you guys to hear this. But Sam and I just want to intro Maya a little bit more and tell you more about her if you don't already know who she is, which we would be shocked if that is the case. But Maya Feller is a dietitian based in Brooklyn. She is a nationally recognized nutrition expert who has received her Master's of Science in Clinical Nutrition at NYU, where she is also an adjunct professor. In addition to all of that, she has worked in the clinical or community nutrition setting for many, many years, and is the national nutrition expert on Good Morning America, which that in and of itself is probably where everybody's like, oh my God, I know who she is, because it's impossible not to if you watch that show ever. And the conversation today went over so many incredibly important topics, and she shared so much knowledge with us that I'm clearly tongue-tied over it. Help me out here.
You're like, help, Sammy, talk, please. But no, I agree. I mean, I think whenever you'll hear me intro her on the True episode, but I really felt like I was so nervous. I'm not nervous talking to her, but I seriously have watched her on national TV for so long. And I feel like, I mean, it's one thing to watch someone on social media and be like, oh, I look up to them, or but
I know you.
yeah, but she's on Good Morning America, all the time. And which I think it's fascinating. And I don't want to say she reminded me a lot of someone, but she kind of reminded me a lot of Lynette Hemley, our good friend.
I was thinking that the whole time.
Who was on a previous episode, and just really bringing it back to cultural roots and traditions and food, and which is just such a needed conversation. And then of course, she just drops total knowledge bombs about systemic racism and nutrition, and being a Black dietitian, we are just so happy that she came on to represent and to talk about that, because we didn't ask her to talk about that, but I'm so happy that she brought that up and brought that into the conversation as well.
And her bio too, that I didn't finish reading. I mean, it says right in here, Maya believes in providing nutrition education from an anti-biased, patient-centered, culturally sensitive approach. And I think that right there is the perfect description of this conversation. And we really kind of talked about healthcare and the biases that exist and the issues there. And just with nutrition in general. And I think there's so many misconceptions about what nutrition is and what it's all about, thanks to social media. Social media can be such a beautiful thing, but it has kind of ruined this field to some extent. I hate to say that out loud, but it's how I feel. So whatever.
definitely tarnished a little bit, but it's not ruined. It's not ruined.
Dead, but
we're here. We're here to have those conversations.
When she really touch on what we talked about with Evelyn as well, about how, nutrition, you have to focus on who you can help. And again, as we always say in these beginning conversations, we're so grateful that you guys are here and hope you love this episode.
Yep. So without further ado, let's just get right in because this is truly, truly an amazing episode. Welcome back to another episode of Drunk Dietitians. I feel like I have to pinch myself over here for today's guest because seriously, I have watched her on Good Morning America so many mornings where I'm like, yes, there's a dietitian on. And I seriously love you so much. So thank you so much, Maya Feller, for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be on. And you all have excellent guests and you dive into very meaty topics. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled to be talking to both of you.
We're so grateful to have you. And I have all sorts of links of yours up over here. And there's just so many exciting things for us to talk about today.
Yes. But before we dig in too deep, Jenna, hit her with the this or that. So we just want to get to know you outside of nutrition a little bit.
I'm ready.
I gave it away that I have a new question today. I hope it doesn't flop, but we're going to start with coffee or tea.
Oh, coffee, 100%. Well, actually, no, let me go back and say this. It's coffee in the morning and it's always 2 espressos. Now that you've asked, I'm going to go there because I'm a serious coffee person and I have been for many, many years. When I was in the beginning of grad school and I lived in Flatbush, Brooklyn, before it was the place to be, there were no coffee shops. And when I tell you there were no coffee shops, I mean, there was not a place where you could go in and get like an espresso or a latte or a, flat white, none of that. And my mom is probably a more serious coffee drinker than I am. And so for Christmas, whether we wanted it or not, she actually gave us this very fancy Jura espresso coffee maker. And it's a bean to drip machine. So that's to tell you that it runs in the family. So that's what we got for Christmas years ago. And ever since then have been complete converts. We don't do coffee shops. We don't, you know what I mean? We don't believe in that. We're it's happening inside of our house. So coffee, 2 espressos, 2 shots of espresso. And then I make a latte at home, usually 2% lactose-free milk or oat milk. Sometimes I mix them. And then in the afternoon, depending on the temperature outside, I switch to tea. So this is dandelion tea. Earlier, I had a little bit of chai. And I say that that's probably because of my Caribbean roots where, we drink tea year round. And, like any good Caribbean person, you enjoy a good pot of tea. So now that it's the afternoon, I'm having my tea.
I love that. Cheers.
I feel like I want to talk about coffee and tea the entire episode now. I feel like so my husband and I have been more recently getting into better coffee grounds because we were using K-cups for the longest time. And I was like, I don't want Walmart donut shop. I know I deserve better than that. And so I feel like I need to take a class from you and learn how to be a coffee snob in the best way.
So, here's the thing that's really funny about coffee. And I know this is not what we're here to talk about, but I did join a coffee CSA years ago. And so I was introduced to all of these different blends and many of them were fair trade. And my big joke that I say is all you have to tell me is that it's, an indigenous woman from somewhere made this or was involved with the making and I'm completely all in. So, this is that was the beginning of my coffee journey. All these collectives, in Latin America and Africa that were, led by women or, heavily a group with a lot of women that were involved. I was completely sampling and tasting all those different roasts. And let me tell you, I highly recommend joining a coffee CSA to get, acquainted with some of these flavors.
That is awesome. And do you see this dog? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There must be a bug in here. If you have a recommendation for the one that you use, we would love to share that too.
Yeah. So I have to get in touch with my friend Karen O, who started this CSA in Lefferts Gardens. That's where I started, and ask her the name of the people who did the coffee. Because now then I went to the food co-op in Park Slope, and that's where I was getting my coffee. But now that I don't shop at the co-op since COVID times, the lines are long. I actually I'm back to delivery, and so I get it from Core Bricks in New Jersey. And they have a fair trade organic section. And so I usually go through that part of it to, take a look at the coffees that I want. And I always go for whole bean, and then, use a spice grinder or coffee grinder to grind it, or put it in the machine whole.
I'm learning so much.
Sam.
I know, me too. I'm like, I can't wait. This is awesome.
I feel like I have shown a part of my soul that no one knows, like my very intense feelings for coffee.
It's amazing.
I love it. So on this trend, on this note, let's move into another beverage, wine or beer.
Oh, wine, 100%. So I do not love beer at all. I don't know. I mean, maybe if I'm in the Caribbean and it's like really, really hot and someone hands me a Carib and I've just had a roti or like a spicy curry, then I could get down with a beer. But I am through and through like an unfiltered, funky wine.
I love that. All right, here's my special one today, but I don't know, this might flop. Now I'm getting nervous. Are you pumpkin season or peppermint mocha season the most? I feel like it's a really tough, in my life, it's a really tough question.
Same.
So I'll tell you this, it's interesting. Like I do love peppermint, but I'm not a peppermint mocha chocolate kind of combo person. Okay. And I do love pumpkin, not just because I'm from the Caribbean and we put it in everything, or my family is, and I have pumpkins, like I have a butternut squash. I have like a for real pumpkin on my, my countertop, and I'm definitely going to make some soup with it. So yeah, I think I'm pumpkin.
Fair. I love that. Sam, what would you be?
I'm really torn right now because I'm like such a pumpkin person, but York peppermint patties are my favorite candy, and like peppermint patty shots in college were like my jam. So I love like peppermint chocolate, and mint chocolate chip ice cream is my favorite. So I don't know. I honestly don't think I could pick.
We'll come back to her.
What about you, Jenna?
No, I love both so much that I'm telling you, it was that's why I had to ask, because it was such a tough decision for me. But I think through and through, I'm a pumpkin girl, because I feel like there's just so much. I have 2 pumpkin candles burning right next to me right now, so it's like hard to say anything else.
Yep.
But okay, last question for today. If you could have anything in limitless quantities, but it couldn't be money, what would it be?
Lobster. Here, hold on.
So I'm a live lobster in here.
Wow, wait a minute. Is that real?
It's a clay lobster.
It looks very authentic.
Yeah. So my son made it for me for my birthday last summer, because I love lobster that much. And I think after lobster, it would be oysters,
Where did the love for lobster come from?
So I think it's a combination of 2 things, right? So I think it's being born in the Northeast in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? So you're right on the water. And then I think it's the combination of the Caribbean. So my biological parents are both from the Caribbean, and I spent a lot of time when I was growing up traveling back and forth. We'd go for research with my mom or something. In Trinidad and Tobago, the lobsters down there are much different. And so the tail is like everything. It's like this very meaty, wonderful, sweet, briny flavor. And, the combination of that, it's like I could get it when I was in Massachusetts. I could get it when I was in Tobago. So, just lobster all the time. I love seafood.
I love that.
That's amazing. I love how you pull that back to like your tradition too. And that was something I saw like all over your website, just looking at all the pieces you write of really bringing nutrition back to culture. Like nutrition is so much tied into our culture and our traditions. And it seems like that's so true for you too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like nutrition is having a similar awakening or reckoning that the country's having, right? So we're in the midst of this racial awakening and this kind of reckoning where people are realizing that, oh my goodness, systemic racism is real on all of the levels. Like we can't deny it anymore. And I think people are also realizing with nutrition that there's so many parts of how we have been taught to interact with our patients that are steeped in those racist practices, and that diet culture in and of itself is all wrapped up in that, right? And so we often used to say nutrition was binary, or maybe some people still do say nutrition is binary, rather than existing on a spectrum. And so that's when I say, like, we're having an awakening where we're like, wow, things have to change with how we interact with our patients, because if we're within the continental US or the territories, it's really, really diverse. And if we're working on a global stage, then it's even more diverse. And we have to meet our patients where they are, honor their lived experiences the same way that we look at lab results. We have to say, like, we're not going to demonize your food choices. And because you don't eat this specific prescribed, and I hate to throw kale under the bus because I love kale, but you know what I mean? If you don't eat this specific prescribed diet that is kale, brown rice, and grilled chicken, then you're not healthy. And we know that that's not the case, right? So if we can lean into this idea that we all have culture, and especially for us as dietitians, that shifts and changes have to happen within the field so that we can effectively serve our patients. And really, I don't want to be too much of like a health person, but really help our patients express their best health possible, and not in a cheesy way, you know what I'm saying? But like in a very real, like, can we find metabolic homeostasis while you honor your cultural food ways? I believe yes.
That was so beautifully said.
Oh, good.
Shit. Thank you, Maya.
Thanks for kicking us off so strong, Maya.
Oh my God, yes. And I love the parallels you made between like racism and then yet nutrition, and how you pull that all together. And I think, I think at the core of it, when we look at nutrition and specifically just our culture, right? If people do genuinely want to improve their health, but when we Google how to improve our health with nutrition, the bullshit that comes up is just overwhelming, right? Like you said, this diet culture. And we just had Evelyn Tribole on last week, the creator of intuitive eating, and she threw out the big fact of like $300 billion industry if you pull healthcare in, which we now know is really deeply rooted in diet culture as well. Yep. So, so profound what you just said.
It's intense. Like when I think about working with my patients, so I still see people one-on-one, and I accept, a handful of insurances. And the way that it works is someone will, they'll send their insurance information to my biller, and I see all the determination sheets. So I see what's covered and what's not covered. And we in this country, time and time again, tell people that we do not value your well-being. We say we will either cover you once you're ill, we'll give you 3 visits when your kidneys fail, you know what I mean? But we're not going to give you preventative coverage. And it's incredible, because when we're thinking, like, if you look at the health of the nation, I sat in on a summit and I think that they gave us statistics saying 27% of us are well across the board in this country, meaning that there's no metabolic dysfunction for only 27% of the population. And then you look at healthcare, what's covered, what's not, who has access to like the top, choice plus, the gold tier. We're telling people we don't value you, right? So it's one system replicating the injustice and saying, no, we're not going to help you. We don't value you.
It's such an important point to state. And it is, I don't think, until that quote that Evelyn said, like, I don't think we realize the impact of how large healthcare is. And what you're saying right there too, I mean, the 3 visits, I worked in a hospital. I remember people with these diagnoses where they were so far away from the prevention stage, but they still only got 3 visits to fix, quote unquote, whatever it was that they were there for. And I think it's such an important topic too, because Sam and I go on this tangent often to each other, that like people look at dietitians and they forget that we have all this clinical knowledge, right? They look at dietitians on social media and they're like, oh, you're going to tell me what to eat, what not to eat, the food police, weight loss, blah, blah, blah. But like, we can really help.
Right.
And there is no representation of us in healthcare, like statistics either, right? Of being able to help prevent. But I'll stop myself there. Please keep going.
No, but I agree with you 100%, Jenna. I mean, that's the issue, right? So people, I mean, so I did some research for this talk that I was giving with a colleague of mine. And I looked back to like what we did as dietitians in the beginning. And basically we made food for men who were going to war. You know, like, so if you look back at our roots, there's all sorts of, you know, misogyny in there, right? There's a lot, it's problematic. Like, and I'm not saying that there's anything, you know, wrong with providing food for people, but if that's our sole purpose, then it's like, oh, right. So there's still, people still have those trappings in their mind. They're like, oh, those are the girls that make the food. When in fact,
dietary, right? That's what we're called in the hospitals.
Yeah.
Dietary.
Yeah.
There's a bit more. There's a bit more.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think this is a perfect lead in, because we love selfishly bringing on dietitians like yourself who we look up to, just to learn more about like, what has your journey up until this point been like, because you haven't always been the GMA nutrition expert, right? So what was your journey from like nutrition student to now? And you can take 30 seconds or 30 minutes to answer that question. Totally up to you.
Well, that's a good question, Sammy. So, it's interesting because my undergrad was in experimental theater. Yeah, kind of interesting, you know, gives you a lot of pause. And experimental theater is not like, oh, you're in front of a camera. Right. And it's not like, oh, you put makeup on and you're like, smile. Experimental theater is like avant-garde. So, you know, yeah. So it was completely different from what I was doing now. And then when I was studying, I said, oh, you know what I should do in addition to experimental theater is I should also study philosophy. And alongside, I should take some classes on critical race theory and like performative gay theater. So that was my undergraduate experience. And I say all of that to say that that has nothing to do with nutrition. So, you know, I spent 1.5 years doing all of the science classes.
Yes.
Just thinking hard 1.5 years. You know, when you take performative gay theater as your science,
and then organic chem walks in.
Like, yeah, those are very different.
You're going to have to do it all. I mean, so I say that to say that my journey was an unconventional one, in that I didn't start out saying I wanted to be a dietitian. And I really did want to work in the arts, but at the time that I was studying theater, there were not many dark-skinned women who were playing anything other than, you know, the neighbor. And so it was clear also there weren't that many like awkward Black girls, you know, so like we have more now when we see more representations of us art. I do see more representations of myself on the screen, but there were not people who were like not just super cool, right? And so after I did my undergrad career or completed it, and I went on to do some very interesting street theater and some very interesting avant-garde theater in the East Village, and some, you know, fringe festivals. Listen.
Do you have any of those on video that we could play a clip?
Can we YouTube this?
I wonder if we can, there's some cringe-worthy things where I'm just like, why? I can look. I'll see if I can find something.
That would be amazing.
So, you know, then it's interesting. Like I just went and I got like a regular job, like a job where you go in and 9 to 5, and I was completely satisfied. And that's when I said I would like to do something else. And I was deeply doing a lot of volunteer work, and like refurbishing playgrounds and stuff. And then I was training for the Boston Marathon, and it's really funny. For, you know, all the runners, it's like you have lots of hours of running and thinking. And when you're training for a marathon, you are very hungry, or at least that was my experience. and I was wondering why I was so hungry all the time. And I was like, where is all of this food going? What's happening to it? Like literally I would run for hours and be like, what happened to my breakfast? Where is it? Like, I'm ready for lunch.
Back at mile 2.
literally. And I was like, the breakfast is expired. And so then that's when I thought, okay, I should study nutrition. And my dad, who's Haitian and an ethnomusicologist, you know, I come from this like deeply academic family, and he worked really hard in his life. And so they only, on my dad's side, they really only believe in terminal degrees. Like there's nothing else. Like you don't go to school just to like check it out and see, like you go to get your terminal degree. So, you know, it's like, why wouldn't you be a PhD? And so I talked to him and he's like, oh yeah, no. I said, maybe I'll get a certificate. He's like, certificate, what? And I was like, oh, just kidding. And so I looked around and I decided, okay, it'd be great if I could go to NYU. And so that's where I ended up. And I would say that, you know, I really wanted to work in community nutrition. That was like what I wanted to do in the beginning and what I did do. And I was running a food and nutrition program. And like, I never actually set out to be in the media. That wasn't like a deep goal of mine, I'd say. And I know that this sounds like just ridiculous, but my real deep desire, even today and now, is to share information with people and help people make choices within their power and based on what they have access to that can help them and, you know, in a real ideal way, hopefully spur generational change. And so that's why I wanted to work within the community, because I really felt like I could go into places where people looked like me and were from the places that my family was from, and that I could talk to them about the foods that they were eating and how they could use all of the excellent health benefits that come with these bitter herbs and roots that they grew up eating, you know, and just have them see how excellent food is. And really lean into like their traditional and cultural foods and kind of get away from a lot of this fast and processed foods that have flooded into, you know, Black and brown neighborhoods. And that's a whole nother story about how fast food has become Black food, right? Because that's really steeped in a lot of, you know, redlining of grocery stores, discriminatory lending practices. And I just kind of wanted to be in those community spaces and work with people who, you know, were like me. And so that's how I ended up doing the community work. And then interestingly, to kind of get to the media, the story is a very funny story. I was out with a group of friends in Brooklyn and bumped into someone who said, I've been following you on Instagram. And I said, oh, that's cool. And this was like a little while ago, right? So like my Instagram was me, like, I'm going to the botanical gardens for member night and here's a bowl of chickpeas, like, you know, not what it is now. And they said, are you a real dietitian? And I said, yes. And the person happened to be a producer at GMA. And they said, we would love to probably have you come in once. And I remember I was at the Bed-Stuy swimming, which I never do, but I was injured, so I couldn't run. So I was swimming instead. And I remember I got out of the pool, and I have natural hair. So when you swim and you get out of the pool, the only thing you have is an afro. And I got a phone call and they're like, it's GMA. And I was like, oh, I just got out of the pool, my hair, okay. And they were like, could you come into the studio? We would like you to do an interview with Mara Schiavo-Campo, and it's going to be on pediatric nutrition. We're going to send a car to your house in like 4 hours. And I was like, oh, I was like, all right. I was like, pull it together. Like, you know, it's like, okay. And so I went up there and we did this piece together. And that was kind of how it started. So it wasn't really like I had this, you know, desire to be on TV. It was more like I just wanted to talk about nutrition.
I love that. That story is so inspiring. And what I keep coming back to in my head is you said something so powerful that I want to make sure everybody listens to twice on here in this story is what you just said was your goal in nutrition was helping one person change their lineage and like change the projection of what their family consumes and change an outcome based on one person. And this is like so apropos for, I feel like my life right now. Sam and I have been talking about this exact thing that as dietitians, we need to focus on who we can help and how we can help them. And what you just said was showing them how to use their roots, their favorite vegetable in a way that speaks to them so they can speak to their family. And that's like the quote of all quotes. Like I'm like, it's so powerful. And like the way that you've turned that into your career and how you're now doing that on national television is incredible. So thank you for being such an inspiration for dietitians, but also for people. It's amazing.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I also have to say that I don't take any of it for granted. You know what I mean? Like I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I have because I said to someone the other day, I said, I feel like I'm trying to grow a garden on Mars, you know, as like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, but it's so like, you know what I mean? Like I think it's pretty, I'm always like, wow, this is a wonderful kind of existence. You know what I mean? And especially it's challenging too, right? In light of everything that's going on, we're in the middle of this global pandemic. We're in the middle of like significant unrest within our country. We're in the midst of extreme poverty and, hunger within our country that is like reaching Doctors Without Borders international levels. We're in a place where, First Nation people are completely at risk because there's nobody, or, the government is definitely not looking out for them. It is, I say it's always a shock to me that this is the moment where the world has decided that they want to make this nutrition shift, or not the world, but, within our community, and hear different voices. Cause it's like, there's so much pain in the midst of a hopeful moment.
Absolutely. It's crazy too, how much more like nutrition is so much more than nutrition, right? Like this conversation is so deep and it's so deeply rooted in so many things. And, it's just that's like all I can think about right now is how it's just so much more than just nutrition.
But I'm grateful that you all have this platform and that you're saying, you know what, we need to hear alternative voices. We need to talk about different ways of interacting with food. You know what I mean? Folks have to know that it's not just, and I'm not trying to, so I'm not even going to say it because I was about to drop a name and then bash them. But we're not, I was like, it's not
You're
just.
welcome to if you want. Feel free.
But you know what I mean? It's not just like some very low calorie diet that's based in liquid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there is so much more to offer.
I think we're all thinking of probably the same person when you say that, but that's a whole other piece of the conversation too, is that we had Sammy Haber on recently, Veggies and Chocolate, and she was talking about how nutrition has become so elitist, right?
Oh,
and
yes.
it's like there's not enough of these conversations out there to discuss like what it actually truly means. And I think that, social media makes it really difficult to get the real roots of nutrition out there, but we're all working together and that's a beautiful thing. And I think like just looking at your Instagram page, if we bring it back to your social media, because it's a beautiful thing on here. I think you do such a good job of just showing so many different types of foods. And so if you could describe like your view on nutrition in, like Sammy said, 30 seconds or 30 minutes, like however you want to spin that, what would be the main message that you want to get across for people coming to your page?
So I think I've said this probably a million times when I talk about nutrition and I talk about people's relationship to food and their access to food and the social determinants that, you know, really have an impact on what's available to them, is that nutrition and health really exist on a spectrum. And if we're looking at it from that lens, the statement that we use within the academy that there's no one size that fits all, it's really, from my perspective as a clinician and someone who works with people, is how do I listen to your food and nutrition story, honor it, and not jump in and try to change it, right? It's like, okay, that's your food and nutrition story. What do you understand about why we're together and how can I serve you? So when I think about nutrition on the whole, I say that it's something that we all engage in all the time. It is not reserved for, you know, the top 1%. It's not reserved for, you know, white Americans only. It's not reserved for people who are making, you know, a specific amount of money, or people who've only been to college, or people who only have a degree. It's something that is for all of us, even though when we look at representations of, you know, who holds the proverbial keys to the gates of health and wellness, we tend to see, you know, large groups of white men being the people saying, like, these are the types of diets that we all should eat. And from my perspective, I say that's not the case, right? That nutrition can be my face, it can be your face. You know, it truly is, I think, based on the individual and whatever it is that they need, so that they can, on a regular and consistent basis, engage in food-related behaviors that support them.
I love that.
Yeah. Speechless.
Yeah. Mic drop, mic drop. We can cut it there.
I will say that when you do come to your page, you see that. Like, that speaks to me as eloquently as you just said that out loud. Like, there's colors, there's different types, there's culture, there's just so much to share. So thank you for putting that into words. And I really need to be better at what I think people see when they come to my page now.
But you know what's so funny is, again, like, social media, like, that is not a skill that I have. You know, like,
differ, miss.
well, thank you. I say this too, like, you know, I just recently reached out to someone. I was like, I need some help here. I was like, I need some help, just like crafting everything. So, you know, effective yesterday, I have some help.
Awesome.
I mean, it's like a full-time job. It's insane. But so I have like kind of a follow-up question to Jenna's question. Have you ever had, like, I know with I've only done like local news, but how they'll come to you, right, with the story or something they want you to cover. Have you ever had, or how do you navigate, I guess would be the right way to ask this, if they want you to speak to like one type of person or one thing, like, do you ever find it difficult when you know you're speaking to like millions of people? Like, how do you make a nutrition topic resonate with everyone?
That's a really, really good question, Sammy. So I think for me, whenever I'm approaching a segment or something that I want to work on, I think like, okay, and this is so simple, right? I think, what's the easiest way for me to share information, but in like the most digestible form? So I would say most, like, at least most of my producers, or all of my producers on GMA, never ask me to talk to like one type of person. They always do say, remember, it's the whole country. When I go on other networks, and you know, that happens sometimes, I have learned recently to be more straightforward in terms of what it is that I want to say. And, you know, I had an experience recently where somebody wanted me to talk about a specific type of diet. And I said that I don't want to talk about that kind of diet, whatever it was, and that I would be happy to talk about balanced eating. I'd be happy to celebrate this person who had, lost weight during COVID and experienced improved metabolic parameters, but that I wouldn't push this as everyone needs to diet. I would need to reframe it so that I could be comfortable in what I'm saying and not as halting as I am right now, which is like, whenever I'm talking about something that I don't want to talk about, it's almost like the words don't come out. And I'm like, and so I've learned to say, like, that's not something that I can do in a way that would be effective or helpful. And I've also learned to tell people, you don't want me doing that either, because if you read anything that I've written in the last 3 years, before COVID happened, before the racial awakening in this country happened, I've always been talking, about systemic racism and injustices, especially in food and nutrition. And also this idea that we have to expand how we think and interact with food. So you don't want me going on any show saying, like, what you really need to do is cut out this entire group of foods. They'll be like, where did she come from?
That's awesome, though, that you've learned to have those boundaries, right? To set with them. And like, I guess we have to keep in mind, like, these producers, right? They're humans that maybe don't have a lot of experience with nutrition or how to talk about nutrition. Or they do?
On the big networks, they're excellent. They are
well, that's great.
Excellent. There is a huge medical team. There is like staff no, they are excellent. And usually it's the same group of people who engage with the nutrition segment. So you'll go, like, when I return, like, I have people that I have a good relationship with, like the most recent segment that I did, I said to one of my producers, I said, you have made my dream come true. We did an on location segment in Fort Greene Farmers Market. I was like, could this get any better?
That's amazing.
Like I said to him, I was like, this is amazing. And we were just talking about fall foods and storage, but he's so good and has such an excellent way of looking at food and segments and reaching people that I think it was more effective than me standing in a studio and having the conversation, because I was talking to the host who was there with a full farmer's market setup in front of her, and I was in the farmer's market, and people were like, oh, that's so cool, because you're giving them different inputs, right? So it's the conversation. You're seeing, oh, look, she's in a farmer's market. I could do that also. Like, so no, they're excellent. They're really, really excellent.
Oh, good. And you were probably having so much fun too, which gives the message of like, food can be fun.
Yes.
Let it be fun, not scary. I love that.
So true. So true.
Well, we started so many different conversations today that I think we're definitely going to need a part 2 at some point, but we have so many inquisitive listeners, which I think is the best thing about this space. And do you have any resources you would recommend for people that want to continue learning about some of the incredible topics that you've brought up today? Anything that we can share? Because after our last post with Evelyn Tribbley, I had 5 or 6 people in my DMs asking about the book that she had recommended, Fearing the Black Body. And I mean, just to be able to get that out there to share with people, like the story of diet culture, where it started, I think it's such a privilege. And I would love to continue to provide those resources if you have any you want to share.
So I have a pretty significant list that like I usually share after, so I can for sure email it to you. Awesome. One thing that I often say to people, because I was clinically trained and I rely heavily on research, and we know that peer-reviewed journals that's like how we go. I still read a lot of peer-reviewed journals, but I also read the Journal of Critical Dietetics. And then I've also switched over in changing my search to looking at some of the journals that are in like the sociology section. And of course now you guys are going to see this is like the real Maya, what I'm doing day in and day out, I'm on NYU libraries looking through journals. And so I have switched over to looking at some of the sociology journals. So I changed the way that I interact with my search. And it gives me an alternate view. I also use some of the public health resources because that is a totally different discussion. Because they've been talking about social determinants in a different way for a long time, where we're still doing food frequency and we're using, data sets from NHANES, which I always say, it's not like, if you go in and you comb through the research and you look at it, you can see that they oversample certain populations because they're not sure that they're going to get the data that they want because there may be bias, and so then it leaves you, the reader, to question, well, how representative is this of our actual population, and how applicable are these guidelines, and then how do we truly individualize them? So I do use the nurses' health study and the physician's health study, even though they are predominantly, skewed to white and upper middle class. But I look at it with a lens of knowing that, look, this is not representative of this country. And so these guidelines may or may not, work for some of my patients or for the general public at large. That was a long answer for, clearly I read.
I love how passionate you are about it. You're inspiring me to read more journals. So it's fine. I wrote down the name. I'm writing down another one now.
Yeah. But yeah, so I do read a lot of those journals, and then also just books. This one book, I wonder if it's right here. You guys can decide here. This is a situation. So there's this book by Dr. Ashanti. Oh God, I don't want to get this. It's called. I'm gonna have to pull it up for you because I don't want to get this writer's name wrong because that's not nice. You know what I mean? That's never a good thing. But it's Ashanti Reese, and it's called Black Geographies, and it's one of my absolute favorite books. And I read it a while ago. It's kind of looking at, food in DC within Black communities. I'm going to pull it up right now.
Live search. I love it.
Yes. Yes. Geography and environmental systems. So yes, Ashanti M. Reese, anthropologist. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I have watched a number of Dr. Reese's, YouTubes, because that's what I do. And then I've been into these cultural humility resources. So going all the way back to kind of the beginnings of them, looking at and they were social workers, right? So they have a really interesting look. And a lot of some of the discussions started around how do you engage in equitable and patient-centered behavior? So reading that stuff too has been very exciting. And then also cookbooks. I mean, I just love cookbooks.
Same.
Michael Twitty and listen, sometimes I read a cookbook just to read the cookbook.
To look at the pictures for me.
Yeah. I was gonna say, that's how I read it. Like, what makes me salivate, and then I'll stop there for a while. Yes. Well,
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. And for anyone listening, if they don't already follow you, where can they find you if they want to learn more about Maya?
To learn more about me, you can follow me on the Instagram. I'm laughing so hard because my son likes to make all sorts of funny jokes about, us older people. Because remember, he's just a tween, so he thinks we're ancient. So he calls it the chap snat. Or that's how we would refer to it. Anyhow, let me be serious.
I love it.
So yeah, you can find me on the Instagram at Maya Feller RD, Twitter too, Facebook, Maya Feller Nutrition, and just regular on the web, mayafellernutrition.com.
I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing so much with us today. We appreciate you, and we can't wait to share this with everyone.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been fun. I could chat with y'all for all afternoon.
Literally feel the same way. Guys, thank you so much for listening and being here with us. I am virtually cheersing all of you. We absolutely loved sipping on a cocktail with you and sharing as many nutrition tipsies as possible during this episode. We know there are a ton of pods out there, and we are so appreciative of your time that you spent listening to us today. Please be sure to check out the show notes for episode details and all of our guest information. We promise to keep bringing you the best and the most knowledgeable and fun guests we possibly can. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and post if you enjoyed our content today. And visit us on Instagram and Facebook at Drunk Dietitians to find out what is up next for us on the pod. We absolutely love you. We appreciate you and can't wait to spend more time cheersing with you soon.